I've been making videos for this channel for a while now. In that time, I'd like to think I've gotten better at the whole process. With that in mind, I thought I'd take the opportunity to revisit a few of my earlier videos. To be clear, I'm not ashamed of those videos. I won't be taking them down or anything. I simply feel there's room for improvement. As Star Trek Voyager was coming to an end, network executives were keen to get another series on the air as quickly as possible. At the time, Star Trek had spent 21 seasons, spread across 3 different shows, exploring life in the 24th century. Series creators Rick Berman and Brannon Braga instead opted for a prequel set before the events of Star Trek the original series. Star Trek fans have since grown somewhat tired of prequels. However, at the time, this change of pace was exactly what the franchise needed. The film Star Trek First Contact had established that humanity's first official encounter with an alien species took place on April 5th, 2063. Chronologically, the next event depicted on screen involved the USS Enterprise under the command of Captain Christopher Pike in the year 2254. That left a gap of almost 200 years of unexplored history. Fans were left to wonder, how did we get from there to here? It was decided the new series would take place in the 22nd century, centered around the starship Enterprise. No, not that one. Or that one. Or that one. No. 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 There we go. Despite introducing another Enterprise, the series proved to be far more than a simple rehash of what had come before. Breaking with tradition, it was simply titled Enterprise. Berman justified this by saying, if there's one word that says Star Trek without actually saying Star Trek, that word is Enterprise. The production team wanted to set the series apart from previous entries. When ratings began to decline, however, the series was retitled Star Trek Enterprise. As though simply slapping the words Star Trek on something will automatically result in fans loving it. It will not. Before we continue, be warned this video will include spoilers. Though characters often rounded up to 90 or even 100 years, the 2-part pilot, Broken Bow, definitively takes place in 2151, 88 years after First Contact. James Cromwell made a cameo appearance, reprising his role as Zephram Cochrane.
This engine will let us go boldly, where no man has gone before.
The unfamiliarity of this period proved to be one of the series' greatest strengths, as it allowed the writers to expand viewers' understanding of the Star Trek universe and challenge what fans thought they knew.
This is like finding out Neil Armstrong wasn't the first man to walk on the moon.
Perhaps he wasn't.
Oh.
The series removed familiar elements such as the United Federation of Planets, and dialed back the technology fans had become accustomed to.
I heard this platform's been approved for biotransport.
I presume you mean fruits and vegetables.
I mean armory officers and helmsmen.
I don't think I'm quite ready to have my molecules compressed into a data stream.
Enterprise's phase cannons weren't installed until episode 12, and there were no replicators on board. The series also used the Gregorian calendar rather than traditional star dates.
Captain Starlog, May 6, 2151.
Many early episodes highlight the crew's inexperience and wide-eyed wonder. Vanishing Point was entirely built around one character's anxiety about using the ship's transporter. Early episodes, such as Dear Doctor, demonstrate the necessity of the Prime Directive.
Someday, my people are going to come up with some sort of a doctrine. Something that tells us what we can and can't do out here. Should and shouldn't do. But until somebody tells me that they've drafted that directive, I'm going to have to remind myself every day that we didn't come out here to play God.
This series, perhaps more than any other, embodied the franchise's mission statement to boldly go where no one has gone before. The crew's initial encounters with new life and new civilizations were further complicated by severely limited universal translators.
Tanika! I don't understand a word you're saying!
This forced them to rely on the linguistic skills of the ship's communications officer. Enterprise depicted humanity's first contact with several pre-established species, including Klingons, Andorians, Tellarites, and even Romulans. Kind of. However, not every species was instantly recognizable. For instance, the Vulcans, as depicted in Enterprise, could almost be considered antagonistic. Iconic aspects of their culture, such as mind melds, were forbidden. Over the course of the series, Vulcan society began to evolve towards what fans knew it would become. Like all good prequels, Enterprise was more interested in the journey than the destination. Of course, the series did also call forward to the chronologically later shows.
Starfleet really ought to think about putting families on starships.
You must be joking.
No one would ever get homesick.
Yes. Well, they better post a psychologist on board, because I'd need one if my parents were roaming the corridors.
Enterprise is the only Star Trek series to date to maintain the same core cast throughout its entire run. Wanting to create a more character-driven series, Berman and Braga took inspiration from the original series' central trio. In place of Kirk, Spock, and Bones were Archer, T'Pol, and Trip. At first glance, this could seem derivative, with the heroic captain, the logic-driven Vulcan, and the lovable best friend with a southern accent. However, the similarities were only surface level. Leading the crew was Scott Bakula as Captain Jonathan Archer. Bakula was already known to sci-fi fans from his role as Sam Beckett in Quantum Leap. Archer's passionate nature was both his greatest strength and his biggest flaw. He initially resented the Vulcans for holding humanity back, as this meant his late father, Henry Archer, never got to see his Warp 5 engine in action.
I've been listening to you Vulcans tell us what not to do my entire life. I watched my father work his ass off while your scientists held back just enough information to keep him from succeeding. He deserved to see that launch. You may have lifespans of 200 years, we don't.
Over the course of the series, Archer overcame his prejudice, developing a mutual respect and loyalty for his Vulcan science officer, T'Pol. The Vulcan officer serving aboard Enterprise was originally intended to be a younger version of T'Pau, a character first seen in the original series episode Amok Time. However, legal difficulties in using this character led to the creation of T'Pol. A young T'Pau did eventually appear in Season 4. T'Pol was initially seen by many as mere eye candy. More on that later. However, she ended up becoming one of the series' most well-developed and fully realised characters, thanks in no small part to Jolene Blalock's performance. Early episodes, such as A Night in Sickbay, hinted at a mutual attraction between Archer and T'Pol.
Then it's good that you're my superior officer, that we're not in a position to allow ourselves to become attracted to one another, hypothetically. If we were, the friction that you speak of could be much more problematic.
The Season 3 episode Twilight even alluded to a potential romance between the pair in an alternate future.
Our relationship has evolved over the years.
Exactly how far has it evolved?
However, T'Pol instead became involved in a rather complicated romance with the ship's chief engineer, Charles Tucker III, aka Trip.
Trip.
My dad's Charles Tucker, and so is his dad. That makes me the third, so triple Trip.
Played by Connor Trenier, Trip had a heart of gold, but was never afraid to say what was on his mind. His feelings for T'Pol developed naturally as the two grew closer. Their dynamic became a highlight of the series.
I've been trying to get you to tell me your age since we left space dock. Why now?
To Vulcans, certain information is considered intimate.
Romantic relationships between Vulcans and humans were of course familiar to fans of the original series, with Spock being the product of one.
Captain, Ambassador Sarek and his wife are my parents.
However, at this point in the timeline, it was brand new territory.
A Vulcan and a human. Romeo and Juliet probably stood a better chance.
One of my biggest frustrations with the series is that I feel that this relationship was never fully developed. Nevertheless, by the end of the series, thanks to an alternate timeline and cloning technology, the pair technically had 2 children together, Lorian and Elizabeth. The only other non-human serving aboard Enterprise was Dr. Phlox, played to perfection by John Billingsley. Phlox was a constant delight. The quirky Denobulan offered both comic relief and moral guidance as required, in addition to his medical expertise. Denobulan culture was also a fascinating addition to the franchise's mythos.
I do have 3 wives.
And they each have
2 husbands, besides myself.
Sounds very complicated.
Very. Why else be polygamous?
The main cast was rounded out by Dominic Keating as Malcolm Reed, Linda Park as Hoshi Sato, and Anthony Montgomery as Travis Mayweather.
I've heard of you, but I don't recognize your face. You're not getting your fair share of publicity.
While these 3 weren't given as much individual focus, each of them grew as characters over the course of the series.
I remember when you used to jump every time the engines hiccuped.
I still do. I'm just better at hiding it.
Even Travis, who is widely considered one of the most underdeveloped characters in all of Star Trek, was given moments to shine.
I should have called him. We were in comm range a few months ago. I guess I wasn't ready to talk to him yet.
You can't talk about Enterprise without mentioning the most adorable member of the ship's complement, Archer's pet beagle, Porthos. As well as helping develop Archer's character, the beagle actually featured heavily in a number of episodes.
Where no dog has gone before.
Unfortunately, Porthos, or perhaps one of his successors, later fell victim to a transporter accident at the hands of Simon Pegg's Montgomery Scott.
So, I tested it on Admiral Archer's prize beagle.
Well, I know that dog. What happened to it?
I'll tell you when it reappears.
Enterprise also featured a number of memorable supporting characters. Ambassador Saval, played by Gary Graham, initially served as a constant foil for Archer and his crew.
Ambassador Saval thinks it would be best if we push off your launch until we've cleared this up.
Well, isn't that a surprise? You'd think they would have come up with something a little more imaginative this time.
By the end of the series, however, he became one of their greatest advocates.
And however far you have to take this investigation, you have my support.
In 2014, Graham reprised his role in the fan production Prelude to Axanar. As the Vulcan ambassador to Earth, Saval often appeared alongside Starfleet Admiral Maxwell Forrest, played by franchise veteran Vaughn Armstrong.
We only want to be your partners. To do what the nations of Earth have learned to do. To work together in common cause.
Forrest was named in honour of the late DeForest Kelley, who of course played the aforementioned Dr. Bones McCoy in the original series.
I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer.
The Andorian incident introduced Commander Shran, played by Star Trek legend Jeffrey Combs. Shran's loyalties usually aligned with Archer and his crew.
You're not especially difficult to work with, Captain. Unlike Tellarites, you understand ethics and try to live by them.
Try?
Well, nobody's perfect.
As the series progressed, the two COs learned to trust one another, which ultimately led to the Andorian Empire becoming one of the founding members of the United Federation of Planets.
We keep doing each other favors.
Isn't that how alliances are born?
Following the series' cancellation, executive producer Manny Koto revealed that had Enterprise been renewed for a 5th season, Shran may have joined the crew as an auxiliary or an advisor. Several other actors from previous series and films appeared in guest roles, including Ethan Phillips and Renee Auberjonois.
Welcome aboard. Thank you, Captain.
Lifelong Star Trek fan and creator of the Orville, Seth MacFarlane, also made 2 cameo appearances.
There's a microfracture in the magnesium jacket. That's why it ruptured.
I ran a pressure test.
Tell it to the man lying in sick bay. Test them again, all of them.
Aye, sir.
Enterprise takes place more than 100 years before the original series. However, given it was produced more than 3 decades later, it inevitably had a more modern aesthetic. However, when viewed side by side, something about the retro 60s design is still believably advanced. One of the most heavily scrutinized elements of any new Star Trek series is its primary vessel. Production designer Herman Zimmerman explored a number of different designs before settling on the final look seen on screen. The ship's star drive section was partially inspired by the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Enterprise was considerably smaller than previous vessels with only 7 decks. For comparison, the Enterprise D had 42. The ship's interiors took inspiration from modern-day submarines, and returned to the more tactile interfaces seen in the original series.
What have you got?
See for yourself.
I'll need a little help here.
The Starfleet uniforms were also reminiscent of modern-day flight suits. The Season 3 episode, Azati Prime, introduced yet another Enterprise.
Where am I?
You're on Enterprise. Enterprise J, to be exact, a distant relative of your ship. We're 400 years in the future.
The ship's exterior didn't appear on screen. However, production illustrator Doug Drexler later created a fully rendered image of the Enterprise J for the 2005 Star Trek Ships of the Line calendar. The ship also appeared in Star Trek Online. Enterprise was the first Star Trek series to be produced in 16:9. It also made greater use of CGI than previous shows. In fact, no physical model of the titular starship was ever made for the series. While some of the CG characters don't hold up too well, many VFX shots still look great, especially in HD. Past franchise stars LeVar Burton, Roxanne Dawson, Robert Duncan McNeil, and Michael Dorn each returned to direct episodes of Enterprise. One of the series' most controversial elements was its opening theme. Star Trek shows had traditionally had instrumental themes. It's been a long road. Enterprise instead featured the song Where My Heart Will Take Me, performed by Russell Watson. The song, originally titled Faith of the Heart, was written by Diane Warren and performed by Rod Stewart for the 1998 film Patch Adams. This break with tradition was another attempt to distinguish Enterprise from previous shows. Unfortunately, the decision received a predominantly negative response from fans. As had happened on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the backlash led to a more upbeat tempo being introduced in Season 3. There's no denying this was a radical departure for the franchise. However, Enterprise was always intended to be a radical departure. I am one of the few people who actually loves the song. I think the lyrics perfectly embody the themes of the series. The title sequence depicted a brief history of human exploration and ships named Enterprise. It included footage of the Space Shuttle Enterprise, which was actually named in honour of Star Trek, the International Space Station, which hadn't been fully constructed at the time, and, of course, the Phoenix from First Contact. The same basic idea was later used in the 2018 reboot of Lost in Space. Funnily enough, Star Trek was initially passed over in favour of the original Lost in Space. Originally, Archer's theme, composed by Dennis McCarthy, who also wrote the theme for Deep Space Nine, was intended to serve as the series' opening theme. This piece was instead used for the closing credits, with the exception of Broken Bow and In a Mirror Darkly. Archer's theme is one of my absolute favourite pieces of Star Trek music. If you enjoyed this video, why not give it a like? Maybe share it with a friend. Or an enemy. Either way, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to see more content here on Channel 73.